Anyway, so let's go right in. It's item pricing in QuickBooks. So the agenda for today is we'll talk briefly about QB Power Hour and the hosts. We'll talk about the CPE process for the accountants. We'll talk about some upcoming live events that we recommend and topics and the learning objectives. So first about QB Power Hour, we are a webinar series, usually every 2 weeks on Thursdays at 12 p.m. during tax season. Is we actually done the opposite that we wanted to do is we're actually running more episodes just because there's been so many things added this year into QuickBooks Online and so many exciting topics that we wanted to talk about. The next episode will be in 2 weeks, so we'll take a break next week. And the next episode we're very excited about is going to be advanced reporting in QuickBooks Enterprise. We're going to go in depth in one of the most complex and most thought after tools in the QuickBooks desktop world. Okay. So we're going to be talking about advanced reporting in QuickBooks Enterprise. On the next week after, we'll talk about streamlining your workflow. Michelle Long is putting together a presentation about streamlining your workflow. We're going to have guest speaker Citrix to talk about some of their tools as well. Then the week after, it's going to be back-to-back practice management tips with Joe Woodard. And Joe Woodard will talk about improving your practice and doing better things to make your practice more effective. And we may also talk about pricing your services as well. Then on 421, we're going to take a 3-week break for the 415 tax season. So we'll resume back again on 421, back to the every other week system. What we cover are tips and tricks and advanced insights on using QuickBooks. Typically, we're 50-50 QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online. Every once in a while, we'll have a special guest, like we will in the next couple of weeks. We'll have a few special guests to provide some additional insights into some of the topics that we're covering. All right, Michelle Long, she's not going to be with us today. She's doing another webinar, actually. Or is she? I'm not sure if she was going to be. Thought she was going to, but maybe not. Please join her Facebook group. Has over 160,000 members. It's called LinkedIn. It's called Successful QuickBooks Consultants in LinkedIn. Myself, I'm Hector Garcia. I live and work in Miami, Florida. I have my own practice. I teach QuickBooks, love QuickBooks, and do some traditional work like tax services and data entry and stuff like that. All right, CPE process. If you're a CPA or an accounting professional that needs a CPE, you will get a CPE certificate if you attend the webinar live. Not available for the recording. So all of these are being recorded and you can watch them on YouTube afterwards. But to get your CPE certificate, you have to watch them live. You have to be logged in for at least 50 minutes. So everybody that's logged in now, that logs out at 1 p.m. Eastern, should be okay. We're going to give you a CPE password in the middle of the webinar. Make sure you write it down. Towards the end of the webinar, answer it correctly, and we will email the certificates in about 3 weeks. So we haven't sent the certificates for the last 2 webinars because we're still within that 3-week period. But we are no more than 3 weeks late on CPE certificates. Some of the upcoming live events, Michelle is running her Ultimate Accounting Beacon, accountingbeacon.com, May 12th and May 13th. This is all online, virtual conference. Check it out. Physical conference with all the pro advisors or most of the pro advisors that are really into QuickBooks will be in Bahamas this year, May 22nd and May 25th. Go to woodardevents.com for that. And then mark your calendars for San Jose, California on October 23rd to 26th for QuickBooks Connect, which is Intuit's own conference. Okay, these are the topics for today. Let me just change this to topics. Right? Okay, so these are the topics and the learning objectives for today. We're going to start with QuickBooks Desktop. We'll talk about how QuickBooks views item cost and item price. We'll talk about margin and markup. We'll talk about item pricing in the item list and the historical price and cost and how these two things affect reports. We'll talk about how billable items work in terms of pricing when there's a markup used or when there's no markup being used. We'll talk about custom fields. It's a special trick that I use to create like an internal price table if you want your employees or the staff members to know what are the target pricing schemes for a particular product. Then we're going to talk about price levels, which is the appropriate way to manage multiple pricing per items. And then we'll talk about exporting the item list into IIF to update the pricing in Excel and import it back. Then we'll go into QuickBooks Online and we'll talk about two price level workarounds. So QuickBooks Online cannot do price levels. We'll talk about two workarounds that I've come up with to help some of my clients in QuickBooks Online be able to do some of the things in, like in QuickBooks Desktop when it comes to price levels. Now, if time permits, I don't think it will, but we'll get into QuickBooks Enterprise automated price adjustments. So let's go right into the topic. So let's start with how QuickBooks views the concept of cost, the concept of price, and the concept of markup and margin. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on the item list. Okay, I'm going to maximize this here. So here's my item list. So I'm just going to ignore the items that are there for now. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to make all these items inactive so they don't bother me. So I'm going to go into list, add, edit multiple list entries. Okay, I'm going to select here my service items, and then I'm going to go into customize columns. And I'm doing this for two reasons. One, I wanted a sample file, but I really don't want all this list here to bother me. So I'm going to go ahead and make all these inactive. So it's a little bit trick to make all the items inactive in one shot. I just go into add edit and I add the inactive column like in here. And then I'm going to go ahead and just mark one inactive like this. Okay. And then I'm going to right click and click copy down. And then I'll click on save changes. That's going to make all my service items inactive. Then I'm going to click on inventory parts. The same thing. I'll click on customize columns. I'll look for the inactive column, add that, hit OK. This is all the way at the end here. So I'll scroll to the right. I'm going to go ahead and mark one inactive. And then I'm going to right click and copy down and then click save changes. And then I'll hit OK. And then I'm going to go into my non-inventory parts. Same thing. Go into customize columns, inactive, add, hit OK. And this is just kind of routine. A lot of times this happens where my client just asks me to make all the item list inactive. So I wanted to kind of take advantage and do it sort of live here so you can see what that process looks like. Now, through that process, I can't make other charge, subtotal groups. I cannot make this inactive. So I would have to make it one by one inactive by clicking on the item button here and clicking on make inactive, or right clicking on each one and clicking on make inactive. However, there is a hidden shortcut, which is Alt M. And the reason why it's Alt MM is because you see a little M being highlighted there under item and that M under make inactive. That's the sequence. So if I wanted to make all this inactive, I just hit, and I'm just, you can't see my keyboard, but I'm going to hit Alt MM. I'm just holding the M key, sorry, the Alt key and pressing M. I'll hit yes, and then I'm just doing that, and I'll hit yes. Obviously, I don't need to make sales tax groups inactive, so I was okay with that. So that's just kind of a little bit of a trick on how to make everything, all the items inactive. Okay, now that we have a clean item list, I'm going to go into new and I'm going to create a new item. And I'm going to start with inventory parts just to kind of simplify the process here. And I'll create a new item and we'll call this Has Avocado. Okay, so if any of you are from California or San Diego, you probably deal with a lot of Has avocados. So we have here the cost. Now this cost is what I call my item cost, not necessarily my historical cost. I want to make sure we separate the difference between a item cost and a historical cost. And then we'll talk about that briefly when we actually create a couple of transactions with that. So let's say this is a 50-cent cost. And then the sales price, okay, let's say I want to make 33% margin on it. Okay, so real quick, this is one of the things that people get a little bit confused about. It's the concept of markup and margin. Okay, so let's say, for example, I'm in charge of creating my items and setting my prices, right? I mean, and setting your prices is probably one of the most important tasks you will ever have. So if my cost in this case is going to be 50 cents, okay, and my profit, or let's call it our margin, okay, our margin, let's say it's a dollar amount. So let's say it's 25 cents, okay, then my sales price should be, in this case, the sum of these two. Okay. Now, the one area that people get a little bit confused about is, well, what is the margin and what is the markup? Okay. So let me just, I'm going to hit drop down here. Okay. Right. So in this case, the margin, let's just call it here markup. The margin for this item is equal to the margin divided by the sales price. Okay, that's our margin percent. Okay, but our markup is going to be our margin amount, my gross margin amount, divided by the cost. And these are areas that honestly even accountants have a challenge, confusion. So what ends up happening is if you don't have clear understanding on what's margin and what's markup, when the user is going to now create the sales price and they're told, for example, they're told, hey, I need you to have 30% margin on this product. Okay, there is no possible way that we can just plug the percentage of 30% in QuickBooks Pro or QuickBooks Premier. You would have to have QuickBooks Enterprise to be able to just plug the 30% margin in there. So I'm going to go to Edit Markup. This is a QuickBooks Enterprise only feature. And then I'll put into margin, I'll put 30%, and then I hit OK. And then QuickBooks is going to, based on a 30% margin, is going to calculate what my sales price is. However, let's forget for a second that I'm going to put here all this. Let's forget for a second that we have QuickBooks Enterprise and we're working with QuickBooks Pro, Premier, or Accountant that doesn't have this margin markup calculation. The only way I can calculate markup from cost into the sales price is by using a formula. So for example, if I know what my targeted markup is, don't know my margin yet, but if I know my targeted markup, okay, what I can do is I can put the sales price, just type 0.50, and then I can do times, like a formula, 1.3. So multiplying any cost times 1.3 is the way to figure out my sales price from margin. Okay, so by doing that, I now get a markup of 30%. Okay, so that's a really important piece when it comes to calculating markup and margin. Okay, there's a different formula we can use for margin, but I don't want to get too much in detail into it. But that is how we can use, without QuickBooks Enterprise, we can use the formula to calculate the sales price from a markup. Okay, anyway, so if I'm working with QuickBooks Enterprise, I can just click on Edit Markup and plug my markup percentage or my margin percentage and arrive to that desired amount. Okay, so that's the only little part I wanted to speak when it comes to those two. So now we have a cost and we have a sales price. And then these are the item cost and the item sales price, not the historical cost and sales price. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here. And then I'm going to create a couple of bills. I'll create two bills. Let me just find a vendor here. Okay, so I'll just create a random vendor here. And I'm going to create two bills, one for one vendor, where I'm going to buy 100 of these for 49 cents. This happens often, right? We'll buy something at a different price than our actual suggested price based on our item list. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then I'll go ahead and do a new bill, and I'll do another vendor. Okay, and then I'm also going to purchase the same product. Let's say I'm going to purchase 75 of them, but this time it's going to be at a different cost. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit save and close. So what I want to show you is if I go into my item list, okay, and I look at my average cost, this number often differs from the index cost or the item cost, because the average cost is based on historical transactions, not based on the item that's there. So that item is only, that cost only activates itself, or it's only useful for suggesting it when you're doing a purchase order or when you're doing a bill. But at the end of the day, the true historical price is going to be driven by transactions, not driven by this cost. I'm going to show you something else that's kind of interesting. I'm going to go ahead and sell a couple of these. So I'm going to create a couple of invoices. And I'll just pick a couple of customers here at random. And I'll select here on the item code. I'll select the item, and let's say I'm going to sell this person 50 at 69 cents. Okay, and then I'll hit save. Let me take out the email later box there. I'll hit save and new, and then I'm going to sell here 96, the same product. I'm going to put here a different customer. Okay, just close that there. Okay, and let's say I'm going to sell this one's for 63 cents. Okay, so I kind of want to show you why I'm doing this. There is a purpose for this. So I'm going to hit save and close. So one of the challenges that we have is in QuickBooks, we really can't control whether the users are selling the product under or under margin or markup. We can't. We can monitor it, however, by going into the reports, sales, sales by item summary, okay? And let me go ahead and hit customize report and get rid of these additional items here. So that way I'm only looking at my average sales price. So now we're seeing what our average sales price on our Hass avocado is. Now, one of the things that QuickBooks doesn't have, it's a way for me to compare what my average sales price is, the actual price that I've sold it for, versus what my item sales price is. However, I do have a little bit of a trick up my sleeve. What I'll do is I'm going to go to reports, list, and click on item price list. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and just select all the items here, even the active ones, okay? Even the inactive ones in this case. Hit OK. That way I'm just kind of seeing what my customer will see, okay? And then I'm going to hit customize report, go to filters, and then only show my inventory parts, just to kind of simplify here the process, inventory parts. And then what I'll do is I'm going to drag the price column and I'm going to put it here towards the left. I know this is kind of a weird thing, but you'll see, you'll get the point in a minute. Okay, and then I'm going to make this report as small as possible, make it a little bit tighter here, like this, and I'm going to actually literally put it next to, I know this is a funny workaround, I'm going to put it next to my item price list. That way I can actually compare the average price that I sold it for versus the actual index price. Now, this is just a coincidence that the item price I had was 65 cents and the average price came out to 65 cents. But if I actually go back and change some of these items, a sales price, so let's say I sold this one for 62 cents, okay, and then I'm going to put that this one I sold for 59 cents. And again, I don't have a way to know exactly what the lowest possible price I should be selling this thing as. So we may have to use tools like this where we can compare, right, hand in hand. I can see, look, my target price, what I wanted to sell it for, is 65 cents. However, what I'm historically selling it for in terms of average price is 60 cents. So this is actually a kind of a neat way to compare it hand in hand. Now, if you wanted to go much deeper into this, you could export both of these into Excel, copy and paste both price tables next to it, and just check and double check by doing a formula, and you can actually compare, whether my average sales price and my average historical sales price versus my target sales price matches. The other side of the coin here would be cost. So I'm going to go here to customize report, and I'm actually going to add here cost of goods sold and average cost of goods sold, these two here, and then I'll hit OK. So now I have my average cost of goods sold. This is the one that matters here, my average cost of goods sold, because I can actually grab from the right side, from my item price list, I can make sure that I include my cost here as part of my report. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and just drag that cost all the way to the left. Okay, make this a little bit smaller, lower this, and then I can also do the same type of comparison. I can actually take a look if my cost on my item price list versus my cost in my sales by item summary report. I can also see if I am on target or off target. Okay, so this is just sort of one way we can do this a little bit interesting. Now let me take you to a little bit more in depth. What we're going to do is we're going to go into an item list here, and we're going to do something what I call, this is a workaround for a desired custom price table. It's going to be an interesting thing, trust me. So I'm going to go here into edit item, and then I'm going to go into custom fields, and then I'm going to create, okay, what I call a custom internal price table that I'm going to use to help my users determine what price they should, they should buy something for worst case scenario and what price they should sell at worst case scenario. So I'm going to put here one called target max cost, and then I'll create this one, target min price. You're going to see, I think some of you probably already know where I'm going with this, okay? So I'm creating one called target max cost and target min price. And then what I'll do with these custom fields is that I can actually now, in my item table, I can say, look, the maximum I ever want to pay for this, let's say, for example, I'm price shopping, and the maximum I ever want to pay for this, let's say, is 55 cents, and the maximum I ever want to sell it for, just to say a number, is 59 cents. Okay, and sometimes we can even, interesting situation, we can go by season. So let's say we can do target max cost, and we can call this winter or something like that, right? Okay, because obviously we're dealing with avocado, so there could be a price change based on season, I'm just guessing. And then I can just do the same thing, target min price, and let's say that will never, that's not, that doesn't vary through the seasons. So we can also use interesting things like that and have multiple target max cost and target max cost. Let's say this is 57 cents, and then the target minimum price will always be 59 cents no matter what. So what I like about doing this with custom fields is that in this item price list that I have here, I can enable this, right? So I can enable all these target minimum, target maximum, and I can, in this case, I may maximize these. So I can put them here on the left just to kind of make it easier, right? And then I can just make these smaller. These are all my target max costs and my target max prices. And again, I can do the exact same thing where I can take now a whole slew of information, like our average sales price, our average cost, our target minimums, and our target maximums, to make better decisions and analyzing about the pricing of our products. Now, the other neat part is also, if I'm doing an estimate, let me just kind of show you. I'm going to go into customers, and I'm going to go into create estimates. If I'm going into estimates, I'm going to modify this estimate template to show these custom fields. So I'm going to click on that one, and that one. Okay, so the first three, but I'm not clicking on the print side because I really don't want the customer to see this. This is just for internal purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So whenever I'm putting together an estimate, in this particular case, let me just make the screen bigger. I select my item, let's say it has avocado, and before I am making a decision about how much I'm going to sell this for, I have tons of interesting information here, like, what is my max cost that I should be buying, what is the max cost that I should be buying in the winter, and what's the minimum price that I should be selling it for. So in this particular template, we're dealing with cost and markup percentage. Okay, we can actually disable that if we want. So let me show you. We can go to customize, go to columns, and I can turn off, in this case, markup. And if I turn off markup in the estimate, then I'm dealing just with the sales price. So now I know that based on my item list, my sales price, I should sell it for 65. But if it comes to negotiation, I know that my target minimum sales price should be 59 cents. So these are just kind of interesting things that I learned along the way. Some of my clients have asked me to consult with them in terms of having much better information about pricing. Okay. Now, the other part here is, which is what would be technically the proper usage of this target minimum and target cost, which is using price level. So this is one workaround that I'm suggesting that you can use, and you can start thinking about what interesting things you can do with this. But the true way to do this is price levels. And this is the part that I want you to pay the most attention to if you're not familiar with price levels, because this is really the fun part about the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and hit clear here, and then I'm going to go to customize data layout and get rid of these target minimum and target maximum. And by the way, this could still have value for other purposes, maybe for reporting purposes. But the true way that we should control these minimums and maximums and target pricings and things like that should be based on price level. So I'm going to click on the list menu, and then I'm going to click on price level list. Okay. In my price level list, I'm going to create a couple of price levels. Just, I know there's some there. I should just make this inactive. That way we're not looking at those. But so I'm going to create a couple of price levels here. I'm going to go to new, and then I'm going to create what I call a fixed percentage price level. This is just going to be a percentage off of sales price. Okay, so let's say this is just called 15% from item list price. Okay, and we'll put here 15%, and then we'll decide, how we want to round. Let's say we want to round to the nearest cent, and then we'll click OK. Okay, so that's one price level. Another interesting price level, it's actually upping the price. Okay, we can actually increase the price, let's say by 25%, and we can call this premium delivery or something like that. So let's say, for example, somebody wants this rushed, but we're not going to charge them delivery, but we want to build in the delivery somehow in the sales price. So that's kind of an interesting way of doing it. So I'm going to hit OK. So what happens with these two price levels is when I go create a new estimate, again, I'll pick here Hass avocado, I will now have a drop down here under the cost that actually gives me the two suggested prices based on the price level. So I have my base sales price, so that's part of the item list, and then I have my my 15% discount. This is based on the sales price, and then I have my premium delivery, whatever I called it, which will increase the price. So these are kind of the interesting things about price levels. Now, one of the major criticisms that QuickBooks has is that I can't edit my item list from here. So most people, to edit the item from here, they have to do a two-step process. I go to the list, item list, then they go look for the item list. And obviously this is a lot more difficult when you have a big item list like this, but they go look for the item list, right click and edit. I'm going to show you a shortcut to edit an item on the fly from an estimate, invoice, purchase order, sales order, and sales receipt. So what I do is I'll click on the item. Okay, I'll just have it selected. Just make sure the cursor is there. I don't have to select it. And then I hit Control L in my keyboard, Control L in my keyboard, and then I leave the Control button pressed, and then I press E. So it's Control L E. Let's go back to that for a second. So Control L E will quickly take me straight into editing an item from an estimate, from from an invoice, from something like so. That becomes interesting, because if I want to change what my cost should be, so let's say I'm going to change it to 45, and what my base sales price should be, let's say it's 69, and then I hit OK. Then after doing that, what I can do is I can clear this and I can put it again. So now my cost is based on 69, but when I hit the drop down, my premium delivery and my 15% price level gets recalculated. So I think that's a really useful piece to be able to on the fly edit the price. That way the item table, the price level can activate right there and then. Okay, let's do a different exercise with price levels. I'm going to go ahead and click on list, back to price level list. Okay, and I'm going to go to price level and new. And then I'm going to change this into a per item type. And then I'm going to call this lowest. Oh, let's do the same terminology, min sales price. Okay, so what this does is allows me to go through my entire item list, and I can choose item by item what is that minimum sales price that I want to sell this for. So let's say, for example, my target minimum sales price for the Hass avocado is 59 cents, and then I'll hit OK, and then I'll go ahead and create another price level, new, and then I'm going to call it minimum. Let's call this maximum sales price. Let's say for whatever reason, we want to make sure that we don't sell something over a certain dollar amount because maybe our customers will get mad at us or something like that. So let's say for marketing purposes, or maybe sometimes I am prohibited by the vendor of the product from selling something above a certain dollar amount. That stuff happens sometimes. So I can just put there 89 and then I hit OK, and then I'll have hit OK. Then I have two price levels now, just to go back to it to make sure my new price level it's in there in place. There's that should be 89.89. Okay, and I'll hit OK. And then this one should be, I'm just double checking, and this one is 0.59, which is my minimum. Okay, so I'm going to close that, go back into my estimate, select my item, and now I have, as part of my drop-down price levels, I have my, whatever, my 15% of sales price, I have my premium delivery, and then I also have what my minimum and my maximum sales price should be. So this is the proper way to do the exercise that I did earlier with all the different custom fields, but I just kind of wanted to make sure that this was an alternative, and you can use it for different ways. Okay, all right. So what we were going to talk about now is to adjust the historical price of a item. Okay, So I'm going to go into my item, my report. I'm going to go to reports, sales, sales by item summary. Okay. And then you can see in this report, this is my historical sales by item summary. I'm going to look at what my average cost of goods sold is. For example, for the event of this product here called salt. So it looks like my average product for the product called salt is $25. Now, I can change my historical cost on an item by making an adjustment. So that way, moving forward, every single item that I sell has the new cost. So for example, for this particular item here called salt, if I go create a new invoice, I'll just do a new invoice now. I go to customers, create invoice. I'll pick any customer here and I'll select my item code here called salt. Okay. And let's say, for example, I sell it for whatever, for $15 each. My average cost in this case is going to come into 25 because that's my average historical cost. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go into my item list, item list, and then I'm going to look at salt again. Right click and click on edit. And then I'm going to see that my average cost is $25. So if I want my average cost to change moving forward, I would have to make what's called a value adjustment. So I would have to go into inventory, adjust quantity or value on hand, then select here where it says quantity, and then use not just quantity, quantity and value. And then I'll select my item here, salt, and then notice that my quantity is 78. So my new quantity is not going to change. It's still going to be 78. But when I hit tab, my new value now has to be recalculated. So let's say, for example, I want my historical cost to be $10. So I will multiply 78 times $10 and hit tab. This is now going to create a new value adjustment of 1,170, which will post on 1/15/2020 into cost of goods sold. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit save and close. And when I go back into my sales by item report, I notice that my historical cost is still $25 because all those transactions have posted before I made that adjustment. However, if I go into any of the transactions I've done before, like this invoice here, and I date this after the adjustment. So for example, I'm going to change it from 12/15 to 12/16. QuickBooks will now recalculate my cost of goods sold based on that adjustment. So let me just go back into 12/15 here. And then what I'll do is I'm going to hit Control Y in my keyboard. And then I'm going to go to here where it says the debit and the credits. And I'm actually going to notice that my credit, which is how much I'm selling it for, is 5,500. And how much it's costing me is 2,500, right? Because it's 100 units. It's easy. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. So I'm going to change the date. I'll bring it up one and then I hit save and I'll close this. And then I'll go back into, I'll hit Control Y again. I'll go back into my journal and you're going to see now that my new cost is different because QuickBooks is now recalculating cost based on that adjustment that I made the day before of lowering the cost from $25 to $15. So that's an extremely important concept to understand is the timing of how, when QuickBooks recalculates the average cost of the units, and the date of the invoice will vary in terms of cost when it comes to that. So I'll go ahead and close that. When I go back into my item list and I right click on salt and click edit, we're going to see that my cost is $10 and my sales price is $15. However, down here, I have a new average cost, which in this case is $18, which was recalculated after I sold those items, after I made that forceful calculation into the item. Okay, so that's one of the parts I had missed that you had missed on the screen. The other part is exporting the item list and exporting the price list. So I'm going to go here into File. I'm going to go into Utilities, Export, List to IIF, and then I'm going to select Item List, and then I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to call this Old Item List. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize QuickBooks, and I'm going to open Excel. okay? And with a blank screen here, Excel open, should I make this a little bit smaller? I'm just gonna grab this old item list file that I saved on my desktop, and I'm gonna grab it and drop it into Excel. So once I do that, my Excel should open up the spreadsheet version of the IAF file. One thing, keep in mind, all this stuff, I'm gonna mark it here red. I don't need any of this stuff. I don't need to mess with any of this stuff. And then here, when my items end, at this point here, where my sales tax, my sales tax and my subtotals start, all these things here, I don't need to mess with either, so I'm gonna mark them red. So all these things are red I don't need. The stuff that I do need is this part, the part that actually contains the item information. So I'm just gonna copy that part, right? All my inventory parts and my non-inventory parts. I'm gonna go ahead and create here a new table, and I'm gonna paste this. Now, just to simplify things, I'm gonna go ahead and delete all these columns that contain extra data that we're not going to be dealing with, because right now we're 100% concentrated in just dealing with the price and the cost. So I'll delete all the stuff here. I don't need any other stuff here. So let's say, for example, there are two scenarios where this is useful. Scenario number one, it's I need to adjust the price and the cost in Excel based on maybe a particular formula. Like, for example, if I wanted to multiply all my cost times 3, just to give you an example, I would just use a formula like this, bring all this down, right? And then I can just copy and paste that into costs, right? Like, so I can delete this. So now I have my new cost updated into the Excel spreadsheet, okay? Then let's say the price would be maybe 1.5 times the cost, so that's 50% markup. So I can put equals, right, 1 times 1.5, and then I can bring all that stuff down. So basically my new price, whoops, that would be 1.5 times cost. Okay, that would have been helpful. So I'll drag that down. So now I have a new price level and a new cost based on specific formulas. And then what I can do is I can just take my price and cost information, again, leaving the order of my items, leaving all that stuff intact, copy this, go back into my IAF, and just paste over it like this, right? Leaving all the other stuff untouched. I can just get rid of this sheet here. I don't need this anymore. And then I can just save right over it. So I'll just click on save. Okay, and then I can close this. And then let me go back into QuickBooks here. And then I have, you see, these are all my old prices that are here. These are my old prices. So when I go to File, Utilities, Import, IIF files, and I go down and select my old item list and click on Open, you're going to see that all these prices are going to change on the fly. Okay. Now, the other part that I mentioned earlier is, what if I'm not going to use, this is really the useful piece of doing it in Excel. What if I am not going to use, formulas like the way I did? What if I have another spreadsheet that contains prices that I got from a vendor or something like that? So what you would have to do is do the same technique, but then use a VLOOKUP formula. So you would have to, and again, I don't have time to go over that, and it wasn't my intention, but you could run a VLOOKUP formula with another price list with a technique that I showed you by separating just the name, the price, and the cost, updating those prices and repasting them back in there. This is actually the single fastest way to update your price list into QuickBooks if you have to involve Excel. However, there is a built-in tool to modify the prices that I want to show you. It's actually a really great tool and very underutilized tool, which is here in the inventory menu. And then we go into change item prices. Okay, so I'm going to go to inventory, change item prices. Okay, and then I'm going to select here inventory part. So in here, I'm going to see a column for my current prices. Okay, and now these are my current sales prices, not my costs. And I'm going to hit mark all, and I could just increase my prices, let's say by 25% very easily by clicking here where it says adjust prices by. I'll type 25, make sure I put percent. If I put 0.25, it's going to raise it by 25 cents. Maybe that's not what I want. So I'm going to go by 25% based on current price, and then I click on adjust, and then you're going to see that all my prices are now going to be increased. okay, based on my current price. I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK here. So I'm going to go into any of my item list. Let's say I'm going to go into this one. I have now a new sales price. Now, let's assume that I want to make a change in sales price based on cost. So for example, I wanted to use that massive change on cost. And what I do want is I want, let's say, 25% markup over cost. So technically speaking, the new price for this would be 1.25. The new sales price for this should be 0.675, which is 25% markup. So the way I would do that, I'm just showing you as an example, by doing that, I'm going to go into inventory, change item prices, select all my inventory parts, click on mark all, then hit this drop down here where it says based on current price. No, make it based on unit cost. Okay, so then I'm going to put here 1.25. Okay, actually, no, not 1.25. 0.25, it's not 0.25, 25%. Sorry, this one you have to actually put a percent sign. So I'm going to adjust the price based on 25%, right, of the unit cost. Okay, so when I click on adjust, we're going to see all the new prices based on unit cost, and we're going to see my new unit price went up to 68 cents, and my other example was 67.5, but that's about right. If this has rounding, we can actually do rounding, or we can actually tell it how many decimals I want. So if I go, actually I have to go up to 2 decimals. So I put 0.1. This will do. I can select I want it to the nearest cent. Plus or minus, let's say 10 cents or something like that. And then once I hit adjust, the system will 1 cent, sorry. The system will adjust the rounding and tell you, the most that it will push up or the most that it will push down. But the most it will do is 2. This is another criticism I have, that the most it will do is 2 decimals. I actually don't like the fact that we can't do more than 2 decimals. Sometimes that's necessary. And the other criticism I have about the screen, again, you have to just deal with it, is that I don't get a column for cost. I only get columns for unit price. So it would be really neat to see the cost so we can actually compare it. So unfortunately, that's just a deficiency. Okay, so right now you can see my QuickBooks Online. So I'm going to go into my gearbox. So I'm going to go to products and services. And then again, the premise is that QuickBooks Online cannot manage price levels, right? So basically that means that every single item in QuickBooks Online is going to have a single cost or single price level. I don't have the way to have that drop down to have a single price level. So I'm just going to make everything inactive here for a minute, just like I did last time. That way I have a sort of a clean item list. Oh, whoops, what the heck happened here? Let me log back into QuickBooks Online, go into products and services. Okay, maybe I can't make this inactive all in one shot. If it's going to happen again, I'll go back. Oh, no. So I guess I can't, for whatever reason, I can't make him inactive in a sample file. But that's all right. So let me go into products and services. I'm going to create a couple of new items. So I'm going to click here on the top right. I'll click on new. Okay. And then I'm going to create a new, let's say an inventory item. And then I'm going to create a category. And actually, let's do this with a non-inventory item. This really only works with a non-inventory item. So I'm going to create a category, and now my categories are going to be my products. Okay, so we're going to call this has avocado. That's going to be my product. This is the workaround. The workaround is my categories are my products now. And this is going to be, we'll call it P1, and then this price would be 59 cents. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit save and close, and then I'm going to go to my P1 here, and then I'm going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to call this P2, and then I'm going to make this 62 cents, and I think some of you know exactly where I'm going with this, and then I'm going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to call this P3, and then this would be, let's say, 75 cents, and I'll hit save and close. So now what is happening is I basically fooled QuickBooks into thinking that they had different price levels. When I go do an invoice, okay, I am no longer using the items as my main categories. I'm using the new categories in QuickBooks Online. So when I go to product service, I can click has avocado, and then I'm going to have here P1, P2, and P3, and then I click on any of these, and you're going to see the price gets updated, and then I click here on P2, and then I have a new price. and then P3, and then I have a new price. So this is what I call the price level workaround for QuickBooks Online. If you need to have one product that essentially has multiple price levels, and at the same time, this could also work for cost purposes. All right, so let me just close that, and then edit here P1, and then I'm going to put here that this is purchased from a vendor, and then let's say at P1 I pay 45 cents for it, and then I'm going to click on P2, edit that, and let's say at P2 I pay 47 cents for it, and then let's say at P3 I pay, and you're going to see this kind of neat in the purchase order as well, let's say I pay 65 cents for it. So when I go create a purchase order, in this particular case, let's say I go to purchase order. Again, I know what my product category is, has avocado, and then I'm going to have all my choices, P1, P2, P3. Actually, I did mess something up here on my product categories. I have to make sure that I mark that little checkbox here that says this is purchased from a vendor, and put here, let's say 65. That's really what I was trying to do. And then let's go to my P2 and go back, make sure I mark this part here that says I purchased this from a vendor, and let's say this is forgot what that was, 0.47. Yep. And then I hit save and close. Oops, sorry about that. So let me go do a purchase order now. Okay, and under product and services, I'm going to type has avocado, and then I have all my different price levels. So I can select P2. There's my cost price level. If I select P3, there's my rate price level, and that's P1. So obviously, this is very difficult to do. Once you already have an item list, so this is actually a much better technique to use when you actually use a category as your item, and this P1, P2 technique as a different price levels afterwards. All right. So again, in a couple of weeks, check out the advanced reporting episode, advanced reporting in QuickBooks Enterprise. And thank you very much for attending today, and have a wonderful day.